Zvuk misli.
Podcast Instituta za filozofiju i društvenu teoriju.
Today, we have a very special guest. Her name is Elena Bougleux, and she is Associate Professor of Cultural Anthropology at the University of Bergamo. She holds a PhD in Theoretical Physics and 2 masters in Intercultural Mediation and in Gender Studies. Her research focuses in the processes of knowledge production in a multidisciplinary and multicultural perspective. She has published 2 volumes based on ethnographic research carried out in scientific labs, analyzing how research practices interact with the social and political context. Since 2014, she is a member of the Antropocen Curriculum project, where she develops a collaborative unit on Anthropocenic landscape. Elena, thank you very much for accepting our invitation and for joining us today. Welcome.
Thank you to you, Sarah. Thank you very much for this nice invitation. And thank you to the institution for giving us the opportunity to discuss today. It's a pleasure for me, really.
So before we, let's say, tackle some of more specific issues that are part of your academic ID, let us start with Anthropocene as a broad concept and probably a new one to the majority of our listeners. So let's begin, if it's okay with you, with some 101 definition of it. So could you tell us a little bit more about this very important and relevant concept, especially today, before we continue our conversation?
Sure, thank you. Because I like very much to start from the basis. When you have a new audience in front of you, which is like the case for me today, it's very important that we are on the same page, that we start from the common basis. And it's also a difficult question because there isn't a univocal definition of the Anthropocene. If we had to have many scholars together with me now, I'm sure you would get different answers. Therefore, I will take my responsibility for giving it's not my definition, of course, it's very widely shared, what I'm telling you. And there are, I say, a 2-stage definition. The first stage is that of its etymological meaning. We try, for some reason, to rename the big span of time, the age we are living in. So the Anthropocene, with this ending scene, which comes from ancient Greek, and it means here, okay, kainos, small and here. It's whatever it's made, however it's made the first part of the word, it's used in geology to indicate the very long span of time, the age we are living in. So at some stage, some scholars, they were not only geologists, decided to try to rename the epoch we are living in. So why? What's the point of making such an effort for a labeling process? Because at the end of the day, nothing is changing, whether you name the time you are living in a way or another. And here we come to the core, the second level definition. Anthropocene, of course, refers quite strongly to the idea of the anthropos, which, as everybody knows, means the human, and not so much the man, but rather the human, okay? And the idea is really to create this new word which keeps together the anthropos, so the agent, which is provided with will, with intentions, with rationality, and also with emotions and with a complex mixture of capacities, and seen, so this way of addressing the epoch. So what's the point of using this word? To rename the epoch we are living in. We have to make a step into geology now, and I think it's a useful step. despite none of us is a geologist, but it's a very transdisciplinary approach that geologists have taken in this respect. Instead of considering that so far the epochs of the history of the Earth, of our planet, have been distinguished one from the other by identifying markers and clear natural signs into the rocks, into the seas, into the eruptions of volcanoes, into the composition of the atmosphere. So very much natural phenomena and markers, this is the way they're called, markers, which were showing discontinuities in a way that when some new marker could be for the first time identified, there you would set the start of a new epoch. And every time this happened, the humans either were not even there most of the times, or were not part of it. They were suffering it. They were just witnessing it, humans or the living forms, or the planet itself. The planet was in a way witnessing, bearing, supporting the events that nature was producing onto it. This has been true since the last age, which has been commonly agreed we've been living in, which is the Holocene, which started at the end of the last glaciation, so almost 12,000 years ago. And since then, let's say, nothing has happened. So 12,000 years, it's very much a long time for us. And this is something I like about the Antropocene, because it's creating displacements, emotional displacements. Because when I tell you, Sarah, okay, 12,000 years is nothing, and I stay here like this, it's like a bit strange sentence to say, and I do it intentionally. So after the Holocene started, nothing has happened for the planet. So everything has been going on smoothly until the humans, in a precise time that we might discuss about, starting producing effects, impacts, new materials, new pollutions, but also modifications on the planet itself, which are so deep and profound that they are comparable to those produced by nature itself. This is amazing. It's a moment when the strength of the human becomes comparable with that of a geological agent. This is exactly the idea of calling Anthropocene. And unfortunately, some of these markers that you can find today in the earth, in the soil, in the seas, in the atmosphere, are scary and dangerous markers which affect the very possibility of the anthropos to live well or to even survive. So it's a dodgy concept. There's nothing to be very triumphant about. Oh, finally, we can compare ourselves to the age of nature, to the forces of nature. It's actually a competition which the humans shouldn't possibly run. But here we go into another of course, level of the discussion is, which is, for example, which has been opened by Donna Haraway, which has criticized the use of these terms, because she said it's not that every anthropos is contributing alike at this production of new markers which modify the planet. She rather suggests capitalocene, because it's capitalism which has been ejecting CO2 in the atmosphere, to make it short, right? And producing nuclear bombs which have spread nuclear isotopes in the atmosphere. So now we are living under a sort of clouds of isotopes which had never been in the atmosphere before, and so far. So there are definitions which can be challenged as well. The commonly shared idea is that the behavior of mankind on the planet is so impacting and so powerful in a way, okay, which has got to be analyzed, controlled, surely researched on with very careful and subtle tools, because those ones we've used so far are no longer enough.
But Elena, how does one become an Anthropocene researcher?
This is a super question. Basically, we could say we are all Anthropocene researchers because we are in the Anthropocene. The other more difficult answer is that the capability of conceiving yourself into the Anthropocene is that of inserting into your research, whichever it is, whichever topic, whether you are an archaeologist, a sociologist, a physician, a urban anthropologist, as I think you are, right? Yeah. If you are able to frame your research within many frameworks working on different scales, the issue of scale and how scaling comes into the very core topic of your research is completely fundamental to the Anthropocene. And here we go back to the first things we said when we started talking. If I say that 12,000 years is nothing, of course, it's a sentence which doesn't make sense in the time span of a Zoom conversation. And not even in a lifetime, let's say, even if we were to meet every day for the next few years, which I hope, but it's not going to make any difference for the 12,000 years span. So it's not a question of personal experience, because our personal experience is necessarily limited in time, in space, in the now, and in the here. Okay, with a few exceptions, but I would say it's very limited. Okay, the idea is being able to compare, to move the gaze, to make these jumps in scale when you consider things which are apparently unrelated, completely the very matter of your research now. And things which are so very small on the other scale, the opposite end of the scale, which apparently don't make any sense or could be just ignored, at the core of your attention, and see how these things come into interaction, because they do come into interaction. There is an important physical process which is called transitional phase. In physical systems, we're not going to speak about physics today, but the transitional phase is when a system jumps from one state to another, all of a sudden. So transitional phase exists in nature. They are pretty much everywhere where we are, and they compel the observer, in that case is a scientist in physics, to juxtapose to different scales or events happening at different scales. So the Anthropocene researcher is somebody which is able to be multidisciplinary and a bit displaced in time and space, I would say. He's a multiple scale researcher. I don't know, I answered enough, but you can ask me to be more
in your biography. I saw that big transition from physics to gender studies and now to Anthropocene studies and curriculum research. And then I also saw that you conducted ethnographic research and ethnography as a fundamental method of anthropology on the one side, but is there something that we could name a methodology? What is a method intrinsic to Anthropocene research?
Okay, yes, this is of course crucial. I don't want to become disciplinary after saying that multidisciplinarity is the core, but ethnography is a super tool. Mm-hmm. Ethnography is a super tool because ethnography, which is the main tool of the anthropological work, is the practice which compels you to start learning through the body. You cannot have a learning experience by yourself doing ethnography. You need the others. No matter how many others, how much you love them, how much you're close are to your home. I'm not talking about this ethnographical technicalities. I'm talking about the fact that you have to stand up, leave your library, leave your desk, and go out there, first of all. So realize with your own experience and with your own emotional involvement and political involvement, because we are political bodies. Therefore, in the very moment of addressing a question to another, of watching somebody else in the face and moving your hands, as Italians do a lot, while trying to convey your topics, this is a political statement, okay? So if you start doing that, instead of being closed in your library, you do it in real world, this is a starting base for doing Anthropocene research. Then these steps brings you back at some stage to, at a later stage, to theoretical processing, which will require you a multidisciplinarity of fields. So when you come back from your notes, from your field work. Of course, the coming back is always temporary because there's going to be a back and two, which is never really finishing. You will be needing to stay in teams. The Anthropocene researchers doesn't exist isolated in the isolated state and doesn't exist within a discipline. Because when you come back, suppose I go to Berlin, as I did for my Anthropocene campus researchers, I went to Westhafen for the second campus, for example. Westhafen is the port, the harbor in Berlin. I needed the people which run the harbor, which were technicians, engineers that could help me how to run the harbor. But I would also need the tourists, because today the super market kind of hub, which used to be in Berlin in the 50s and 60s, is no longer that, but it's become a more touristic hub. So I needed the people, which were mainly from Asia, Asian tourists, Chinese. It was pre-COVID time, but also the containers of the goods which were shipped to Berlin via the rivers were from China. It is a different part of the Chinese world, and I needed all these. And let me tell you more, that the Stabi, which is the Staatsbibliothek in Berlin, has got a section and a deposit there in the harbor. How comes? The reason is that there were very many empty halls, large spaces, which were like storage houses abandoned during the time of the wars. And the Staatsbibliothek expanded there because it was placed with expansion in vacuum kind of thing. And now they don't want to go back because they like the place. So to study the harbor in Berlin, I needed all this incredible team of people. And it's a research which, of course, doesn't belong to me, doesn't belong to any of them. It's a collective enterprise, which also spans across times because it goes back to the time of the Berlin Wall, because everything started changing since, of course, 1989. And then there was 25 years wall times for Berlin, which characterized the social and political life and the commercial life of the city in a very peculiar way. And then you had the time of industrialization, the war, of course, the World War II for Berlin, a crucial time. And going back more, you have the super powerful industrial expansion of the Reich and Prussia since the end of the 1900s. So all of these elements, like in the palimpsest, like in a stratigraphy, contribute to understand the ethnography we do in Westhafen today. Okay.
Yes, so it's very interesting. Like some kind of, when I listen to you, it's very interesting, very similar to ethnography and anthropology that we do when we research human culture and human practice, but just you need to defamiliarize yourself from your familiar environment and to contextualize everything all the time. But it's just the huge difference is that you're taking into account everything else, not just it's like anthropology, but not anthropocentric anthropology.
Exactly. This is why Donna Haraway, which I love very much, was criticized for her not understanding the meaning of the anthropos, because the anthropos is not really at the center. You are perfectly right in the sense that if we end ourselves at watching the word Anthropocene, it's the geological era determined by the action of the anthropos. And what are the animals? What are the molecules of our gas? So in this sense, she was right. But actually, in order to put some gaze, some investigating gaze into this Anthropocene thing, you need to really become as least anthropos as you can. Exactly, and involve into your research, for example, the multidisciplinary, the multi-species ethnography. Because in the harbor, just to stay in this example, because it's an example I know very well, we have some very incredible species, a variety of species of plants which grow in this harbor, because the ships used to carry remains of soil, remains of seeds. And so these plants have found this fantastic environment, which was pretty much abandoned before they could thrive. They could thrive because there was not an inhabited place where people cut the weeds, or you just trade on them, or you drive on them and they die. They were left to thrive. And so you can find bits of China, bits of Africa, bits of Southern Europe, incredible butterflies from the south of France, which are almost extinct in the south of France, and they are there in Westhafen, just to make a small example. Yeah, and of course, none of us, anthropologists or engineers of the harbors, would have been able to spot that that particular butterfly is very rare in France nowadays, because it's very common in Berlin, at least in this area. Yes, so the Anthropocene is this capability of researching in a way to get out of your disciplinary borders, but also get out of yourself in a way. Understand yourself as a part of a big body, of a big entity, which spans over the borders, spans over the conflictual little things that everything becomes very much reduced to scale of irrelevance when seen in the perspective of the Anthropocene. So conflictual attitudes within two areas of a certain city. I'm talking of Florence, for example, which is the place where I'm now at this very moment, my city. Florence is famous since the Middle Ages for being cut into quarters areas which fight each other. It looks like very, very kind of funny, let's say, and small scaled.
So let us continue to our second topic. That was actually something that you yourself suggested when you sent us literature to prepare for this conversation, and that is something that we already kind of tackled right now when talking about your harbor example. And the question is how a plurality of research fields, when it's deeply interlaced with the grassroots, can contribute to develop a democratic and empathic thinking of society and of public policies and educational policies that are, as we can agree, absolutely needed generally, but in the framework of Anthropocene too.
Exactly, because the very basic question every researcher should ask themselves is why? Why do I do this research? And there is a big answer, I think, to this question: why shall we research in the Anthropocene framework? Because the Anthropocene framework is a way to become accountable for our actions, keeping into consideration the unexpected, keeping into consideration what wouldn't be straightforward included in our perspective. So let's simplify. Okay, let's go back to some simple things. The Anthropocene impact, onto the planets, onto the earth, onto the rivers is basically taking out possibility of development. Okay, so nature has got a variety of perspective, a variety of paths that it can follow when it's left to go in time, ahead in time by itself. And the anthropocenic action, it's as if it was cutting some possible evolutions to happen. The Anthropocene, the anthropic effects onto the planet has been that of diminishing the variety of possibilities, diminishing the number of species, reducing the variation of seasons, reducing the number of environments that we can live in. Okay, so making the deserts hotter and the dried area drier. Okay, so this diminution of the variety, if could be considered a simplification in a certain way, because okay, we humans customize ourselves in order to be able to survive in that particular environments, and we just concentrate on them, make the best of them, and forget the rest. On the other hand, it's producing fragility, because when you cannot discuss with your boundaries, when you cannot negotiate the flexibility of your boundary, you become very fragile. Because if the boundary, until the boundary holds, okay, the first hypothesis applies. But when the boundary breaks down, you have no B plan, okay? You have no other alternative. And the boundary is bound excuse me, is necessarily going towards its cracking. Why? When I consider a human or a natural environment, I always include some flexibility in its capability of resilience. The production of resilience is a very important quality that we all know. When you change a system, it tends to go back to the state it had. But such resilience is very much disguising sometimes, because it might lead to the collapse of the system itself. So a system which is too much resilient eventually doesn't adapt anymore to anything. It's as if all the capability of resisting had been exploited at the same time. So when we think of the social implication of this, and we make I don't want to make any particular example, but when we think of a society which produces conflicts, for example, the production of conflicts and the production of borders, which separates people from the other, a quarter of the city from another, an area of the world from another, for example, Europe from the southern part of from Africa, consider the Mediterranean like a huge border. This border is bound not to resist anymore at some stage of the pressure. And when the border, whether it's theoretical or a material border, breaks, there's no strategy developed. There's no, it's just like a problem. It's just like a tragedy. It's just like a crash of the system. Okay? So I don't know if I'm going in any direction you wanted to ask me, but I see that the necessity of acquiring this flexibility towards the other disciplines is just a metaphorical way to understand how we should acquire flexibility towards the others' ideas, toward other people's ideas, and towards the social implication of differences.
So now we're kind of just, let's say, going from one question very naturally and smoothly to another one that was our, let's say, third topic, and that is also connected with a big part of your research interests, that are processes of knowledge production and their political and social implications. So when we were preparing this episode of our podcast, you sent us amazing text, freedom and interdisciplinarity, and that was very significant to me personally. At the end of the year, when we need to count our our scores, what we accomplished through the year, why we are doing this, and for whose and what kind of future. So I'd like to hear your thoughts on the text that you sent us, but also a little bit more on the concept of curriculum research. That is also something that, as a specific research topic or a subdiscipline, is quite new to our listeners.
Yes, thanks for reminding of Yehuda Elkanah. Yehuda Elkanah has been a great historian of science, and I had the luck to meet him in person in his late years in Berlin at the Max Planck Institute of History of Science in Berlin. And he used to start his fantastic talks. It was very, very... it was a pleasure to listen to him, because it was always witty and never boring, despite being so intense. That the only institution in the world which was more ancient than university was the Pope, the Vatican State. So, of course, it was nothing to do with the Southern Europe, as I say, Christianity nor Catholicism, nothing to do with him. He was from a Jewish family, and he lived between Budapest and Tel Aviv and Berlin. So he had a completely different background in terms of culture and religion. But he was very much severe critical person towards the institution of academy. Universities are too old. Let's summarize it. This is what you say. The universities are too old. Not because they are led by these deans, which normally have gray hair and a very deep voice, but because they reflect the structure of knowledge that was thought about in the Middle Ages, in the European Middle Ages. So very, very specific part of the world which produced a structure of the knowledge which has been replicated in Europe and in the West since ever. So for the last 1,000 years or so, it's been going on in the same way. And also expanded through colonialism, through impositions of several fashions throughout the world. So if we might be very happy that the alma mater started in 1088 in Bologna, the most ancient university in the world, now we should really not be bound anymore to framing our way of thinking in that particular way. Because new problems which have been arising in society and in the world require new approaches and also new disciplines. It was even rejecting the category of discipline because this disciplinary taxonomy is a sort of boomerang, which is breaking your problems in pieces, which you might possibly resolve one by one, but definitely never been able to put the answers all together. So he was suggesting, and I would say that the Antropocene curriculum is one of the late consequences of his thought. The idea he had was that of starting from problems, not from disciplines. So what are you researched on? I research Berlin, or I research the heart, or I research economic crisis. And then you see which disciplines are needed for that particular problem. So no one of the relevant problems of contemporarity belongs to a disciplinary field. This was his absolutely basic sentence. So even the climate crisis, it's not a climatological problem only. Of course, it is also a climatological problem, but you cannot get away with it just with climatologists. And that was going on for so many different examples. So his love for multidisciplinarity, he used to say it was like a necessity, because the problems at stake we have on our desk do not fit into the disciplinary taxonomy. Therefore, we have to let people talk, let the experts talk. But this talking is very difficult when everybody has been trained since they were 18 years old until they are 30, so basically from their BA to their postdoc or whatever, into one learning framework. Of course, this is the type of human people and human resources we have now, so researchers which have been trained to stay in their field. So what's the strategy now? And we come to the method again. We have to really take time, because the process of mixing methodology, it's a super slow process. It's a very slow process, and it requires a lot of patience. So it requires a very mild and smooth approach. So some soft skills come into the game, which have got really nothing to do with it. I am a researcher. What's got to do with soft skills? I'm not a barman, which should be smiling to my customers. No, the soft skills are completely as important as the content of your knowledge. Because if I have to provide my knowledge to you and you have no idea of what knowledge is about, but also convince you that my knowledge is useful for your problem, it's the way I provide my knowledge to you which becomes so important. Maybe the way I provide my knowledge to you is as important as the knowledge. This is why every process of knowledge convergence is unique, because the way I provide my knowledge to you today, this morning, could be working well with you, but not working well with another person tomorrow morning. So I might need to reshape my way of communicating in order to provide my, knowledge of urban places in Berlin, not to you, but rather to a botanist or entomologist, which studies the butterflies. Okay, so the team which produces a certain knowledge is a unique alchemy of people, plus knowledge, plus soft skills to let this knowledge blend one into the other in order to make them work, which is a slow process, which is in the end a political process, if you see what I mean, because my way of providing my knowledge to you is not just writing my paper, I put it in a review, and then it's your problem. You understand it, you read it, you quote it, or you don't quote it, it's your problem. I have to kind of come to you and provide my knowledge to you, and the other way around as well. Okay, so of course, this was his dream, his vision. He has been also the rector of the Central University in Budapest, which has been a super enterprise, which has now taken completely different paths, let me say, unfortunately. And but that was many, many years ago. And his legacy has been passing through the Max Planck Society and the Max Planck Institute for the History of Science in Berlin, the MPIBG, which is run by the rector now, which is one of the two founders of the Antropocen curriculum project. So the circle is closed.
Another smooth transition. Just when I wanted to ask you more to actually be a salesman and sell us the Antropocen curriculum.
Yes.
Will you?
Okay, I mean, it sells itself by it's self-selling very well. Let's say it doesn't.
Yeah, I'm writing my check already.
Because it's everything. First of all, it's very much open access. Everything is available online. Everything is done. Is even too much told, written, photographed, filmed online. Therefore, everything is there. But what's the basis? The basis was very interesting. The start was the convergence of two people, two single individuals, which one is the one I just mentioned, which used to be Judah Elkanah's friend, Professor Ren, which is the director of the Max Planck Institute for the History of Science. And the other is Ben Scherer, which is the director of the Haus der Kultur und der Welt in Berlin, which is a cultural institution directly run by the federal administration. It's something in between a museum of contemporary art and a research center in contemporary languages. So the Haus der Kultur und der Welt, it's also a beautiful building, very, very much placed in the center of Berlin, in the middle of the Tiergarten, and which hosts exhibitions, film festivals, conferences on cutting-edge problems of contemporarity. So the convergence of a very serious scholar type institutions, which is bound to publish papers to have your scores at the end of the year. And the other branch, which was the artistic and more performative way of producing popular knowledge, because the Haus der Kultur und der Welt has got a popular public. It's not just any public, but anyway, you pay your ticket, or most actually initiatives are even free, and you just get in. There's a beautiful theater, a big one. There's smaller theaters, many halls for exhibitions. So it's a place to be visited by the general public. The convergence of these two minds and of these two institutions produced the curriculum project, which is still going on as the hypothetical new way of teaching at a higher university level. So within the curriculum, the Antropocene curriculum, which is run every couple of years, some topics are chosen, some case studies. This again comes the similarity to anthropology, right? So the working on case studies. So the selection of very crucial elements like the Mississippi River has been one of the last campuses, or Venice, the city of Venice, and the way it's falling into the water, slowly bending on the side, and its incredible problems now. Some issues are taken as the core topic to be investigated, and a plurality of professors are invited by different disciplines to work together in small teams which address a particular section of the problem, but the problem is just one. The teams has got to be multidisciplinary. So one natural scientist, one social scientist, and one artist. This has got to be the core, the minimum You cannot have the scientific approach and the social approach and the artistic approach. They have to come together. And there are some field works, and then there are some processing of work, and then there are feedbacks to send to people online, which respond. There are the literary research, literary review, of course. And the curriculum spans for a few weeks up to a few months of investigating in that way we discussed at the beginning a particular topic, letting this group live together. And this was the amazing resource of the House of Culture.
How big are those groups, those research teams?
For the first couple of campuses, there were 100 students. 100 students, there were applications, you could just apply, and there were, unfortunately, we had to select because there were a lot of applications. But now the idea is not to have the campus with capital C in Berlin every couple of years. Campuses have scattered. The Antropocen campus has exploded, as you can see from the website. Now I'm going to make this anthropocencurriculum.org. The campuses can be organized everywhere. As long as you get in touch with the main team, and then you decide that you have some process, you co-develop your particular campus. And there have been campuses in Shanghai, in Lyon, in Sydney, and there was about one to be organized in Buenos Aires, which unfortunately was stopped by COVID. And then we're trying to look over there because the situation is not very simple, and so on. So you can also have an Antropocene seminar, which is just a 3-day event with this particular approach. Case study oriented, multidisciplinary, and a group of people. If you just
dissect the topic.
Dissect, but also keep together. The important thing is that people stay together, people live together. And this is something which I'm really grateful to this team for having the chance to participate. There's a threshold of involvement, which is the empathy, which develops among the people. Because after some time, it becomes really important that I talk to you, and I talk to you in the morning, in the evening, night, when we're having coffee, when we're having dinner, when we're having fun. And this produces an extra layer of creativity, an extra layer of visionarity. Let me say that there are visions which emerge in these cocktails of people, which are amazing. But, of course, there's a backlash. They don't fit, quite often, they don't fit any disciplinary category. So where do you publish? Where do you present? In which course, in which academic course do you insert these competencies? This is left to the single person initiative. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. In Italy, it's also not been easy at all to introduce these topics in 2014, 15, 16, 17. Imagine, I was coming back like an alien from Berlin, and I could never name a course of mine. I've been teaching in university since now 18 years at least, and I never started a course with the Anthropocene in the title. I couldn't, because what is it about? So the alma mater is resisting. It's definitely putting his hands in front and trying to keep the disciplinarity working. And in a way, disciplinarity is useful because competencies are desperately necessary and needed. It's the way they're used, and especially the way young people are evaluated as well. This is very bad, because if young people are evaluated according to how much they stick to the existing trail, how can they possibly invent the new world, which is definitely not in the existing paths? Okay. So the Antropocene curriculum campuses have been, or they are actually, I should speak in the present time, they are wonderful little utopias which function as targets, as ideal targets for the development of official teaching institutions. But the official teaching institutions, except a very few cases, don't embrace these experiments because it's fundamentally challenging their structure.
But the way you sell it now, I mean, it sounds as a very rewarding process for just learning about the research process, and for a young researcher, for a young scholar, it seems to me like a very valuable experience to actually, as you said, displace yourself and maybe see your problem that you are tackling on your PhD, on your postdoc from another expert's perspective, and then embrace it, or maybe it shifts your focus or just gives you fuel to continue when you are just, you know, overwhelmed with your discipline and its boundaries.
Mm-hmm. Yes, this is true. No, I thought there was a second part of the question, but where's the backlash? Okay. Yes, this is definitely true. It's a breath of fresh air when you are suffocating in your discipline, but this wouldn't be enough. This is a lot, but it's not enough. I would say that the long-term consequences are, one is that you acquire a gaze onto your research, which you bring back home to you, whichever standard research you would do afterwards. Even if you go back to the main line, the super trodden trail of your discipline afterwards, for some reason, if you do that, you will not be the same researcher as before, because you have a subtlety, a thorough capability of investigating more, even staying within the super famous trajectory of your research, first of all. The second thing is that you desperately need to repeat that experience again. It's like an addiction. Therefore, you tend to replicate this methodology, widening the audience of people which want to work in this way. So I don't think this is an experiment limited to the young generation of scholars. It's definitely necessary for the young generations, but also a senior professor could re-see his or her own career in a completely different way, and being able to really go into deep. Let me make you an example. The research on rivers, okay? The Antropocen rivers campuses have been one of the main line, okay, of the main important path. So up to the Mississippi River investigation, many other rivers have come into the water worlds have come into the central gaze of the Antropocen campuses. So what's the water thing? The water connects. The water is alive. You never watch the same water twice if you stand on the side of the river, right? Because as you watch the river passes and you stay. Therefore, the water which you are watching now is going to be seen and watched by somebody else later on. And it was belonging to somebody else before it got to you. So the water connects, the water passes. And when you start caring of the water, of the quality of the water in front of you, for example, you have a super beautiful river or two actually in Belgrade, so you know what I'm talking about very well. You cannot care of your river only there, okay? Because it doesn't make any sense, because that's not going to be your river anymore after 1 minute, okay? And so on. Therefore, the river connects and makes you think in a broader way. And can you choose your partners of your research? No, because the river goes where it wants. So you have to follow the river or follow the water, as some water scholars say, follow the water, and or upstream or downstream, and being connected to those which are connected by the river. And this is horizontal, right? But in terms of verticality, if you stay in the piece of river and if you stay on the margin and then you look down, what's beneath? You see the surface of the water, but very rarely we can see through the river. And even more rarely, we can see under the soil of the bottom of the river and what's happening and how many things counts out of those which happens in the profundity of the earth and how many effects are of the atmospheric of the city climate or the capability of crossing a certain river. And that becomes an economical, a social topic, are connected to the very part of the river. So if you think of a river, of the simple element of a river, here you are already anthropocenic. To go back to your first question, how you become an Anthropocene researcher? By focusing on a river, for example, in this particular way, which is not particular because the way the river is, if you are a researcher which cares about the indigenous ontologies, for example, the water of the river can have a juridical personhood who takes the side of the river in the courts. If I pollute the river, okay, and if I kill the fish or if I kill the plants, who's going to defend them? You, because you are the environmentalists, okay. but then we are one human against one human. But if the river has a personhood, a juridical personhood, okay, the river might be defended and somebody pays the price. But if I change the state because 100 kilometers upstream, there's another state, how is the river recognized as a juridical person in the other state? You have a different juridical system. So you see, even staying just with the simple thing as the river in your city, you have to become Anthropocenic. And because we have just one planet, we have to face research this way altogether. Every topic is on a scale or another connected to so many others. Did I answer?
Yeah, yes, wonderfully, and I think very wonderful conclusion to our talk, especially very relevant in Serbia today, as we are witnessing environmental protests and a lot of potential danger from pollution, from lithium mining, from small hydro plants, and so on and so on. And then we are actually seeing how and the environmentalists and like left activists and also like people from the villages that are affected by those plans are joining together in their struggle for the environment, but also it's an issue of economy and of politics and of education and of class and privilege and so on and so on. So it's yeah, the example of river is yeah, great metaphor and very on point for today's situation in Serbia. I don't know when we will actually when will be the first showing of this episode of podcast, but I'm sure that this issue will stay relevant in February. I mean, unfortunately, it will not be resolved on the benefit of the rivers and of people and of planet. But yeah, I think yeah, to listen to this again in February or after some environmental protest would be useful for us to learn how to grasp something that is so so complex and yet so ordinary. I don't know, as
it's both.
Yeah,
it's definitely both. And I would say that I've been following the protests in Serbia for sometimes, despite they are so poorly reported in the international media. So you have to really look for them. But I had some lucky scouts which would help me to get into those. And I, from a foreign perspective, I can say that the river is a super actor now. It's a hyper actor, let's say, in the Serbian political scenario of contemporaneity, because it's so Serbian, okay, and it's so Belgradian, if you can say that. So it's really the city river, but it's also so broad because there's such a story, there's such a length, there's such a span, and the environmental issues are just a part of it. They are super important, but there are the historical and the energetical, the powerful capability of transforming the landscape at a large scale, and of course the nano marks the borders. It's like the super engine of the policy in Serbia nowadays in these very weeks, and I hope you'll be able to make the most for using this thing also as a research topic, as a political research topic, because if you solve the rivers problem, you are almost there in the Anthropocene. One of the worst things that humans do to the planet is damaging the quality of fresh water. The fresh water is really limited. Once it's damaged, it stays damaged for 10,000 years. We need another geological era to fix it. So we haven't got that time. So yes, let's follow the water.
Let's follow the water. Elena, thank you very much for this
Thank you
talk.
to you.
And for introducing this very interesting framework for research and a methodology and a concept to our listeners. And I am sure that many of them will be as inspired as I am by your by your talk. And then they will, let's say, at least Google the Antropocen curriculum. And,
it's very easy, yes.
Yeah, and learn
and everything
more.
Is free, can be taken, can be downloaded, it's there, it's for dissemination.
Yes, so also wonderful addition to open science that is connected to the freedom of university. That is another important thing. So Elena, thank you very much.
Thanks to you again. Thanks very much for all this time you dedicated to me. And I hope you will be continuing with these initiatives, which are not formal, but also very deep to involve the audience you think of.
We're trying to sell our knowledge also as you are, and use our soft skills. So thank you once again very much.
And see you soon. Hope to see you soon.
See you soon, hopefully.
See you soon again. Okay.
Bye.
Ciao, Sara. Bye-bye.
Ciao.